The year is 2027. The city of New York stands at a breaking point. The plan to close Rikers Island, a jail long known for violence, corruption, and misery, has reached its final deadline. But as the last days tick away, a chilling question hangs over the city. If Rikers is shut down, where will the thousands of men and women locked inside go? And more importantly, can New York's justice system survive the fallout? The most shocking moment came when the mayor stood before reporters and admitted something no one expected. The city was not ready. Construction of the smaller jails meant to replace Rikers had fallen behind. Budgets had been blown. And now, with Rikers' closure set in stone, the possibility loomed that hundreds of inmates might be transferred into already overcrowded facilities. Some officials even whispered about the unthinkable: mass early releases. The words hit like a bombshell. For families of victims, it sounded like betrayal. For advocates, it felt like justice was finally being tested. For officers, it was chaos waiting to explode. But here's the cliffhanger. What happens when you try to close one of the most infamous jails in America, while the system meant to replace it is still broken? To answer that, we need to step back and understand how we got here. Rikers Island has always been more than a jail. Sitting on 413 acres between Queens and the Bronx, it became a symbol of everything wrong with mass incarceration in America. Brutal fights, corruption, endless lawsuits. For decades, critics called it a human warehouse, where people, many still waiting for trial, lived in conditions worse than prisons built for the guilty. The push to close Rikers began after years of scandals. In 2015, the tragic death of Kalief Browder shook the nation. A 16-year-old boy accused of stealing a backpack. He spent 3 years at Rikers without trial. 2 of those years were in solitary confinement. When he finally came home, the trauma was too much. His story ignited protests, documentaries, and calls from leaders demanding change. "Shut it down" became the rallying cry. By 2019, city officials had a plan. Close Rikers by 2027 and replace it with 4 smaller modern jails spread across the boroughs. The goal was simple: get rid of the violence, create more humane conditions, and reduce the overall jail population. On paper, it looked like progress, but reality would prove far messier. As construction started, delays piled up. Neighborhoods resisted the new jails being built in their backyards. Costs skyrocketed. Meanwhile, the jail population at Rikers didn't shrink the way officials promised. In fact, violence inside the jail only grew worse. Guards reported daily assaults. Inmates described conditions as hell on earth. Families marched in the streets, torn between fear of more crime and anger at decades of abuse inside the island's walls. By 2025, pressure reached boiling point. Federal monitors warned that Rikers was no longer safe to operate. But the city still wasn't ready. New jails weren't finished. Old jails couldn't handle the numbers. And the public was split. Close it at all costs, or risk unleashing chaos. Then came the breaking point. A riot inside one of the Rikers housing units. Officers were injured. Inmates set fire to parts of the block. Images leaked online of smoke billowing from the jail, fueling the debate nationwide. The smoke from the riot at Rikers still lingered in the air when city officials gathered for an emergency meeting. News cameras had already spread the images across the country. Guards bleeding, inmates waving makeshift weapons, black smoke pouring from shattered windows. For many, it was proof that Rikers couldn't last even 1 more year. For others, it was a warning. Closing the jail might be even more dangerous than keeping it open. Inside the meeting room at City Hall, tempers exploded. Correctional union leaders argued that their officers were being sent into a war zone. Families of inmates demanded immediate transfers to safer conditions. Advocates pushed harder than ever for closure, saying the riot only proved Rikers was beyond repair. And in the middle stood the mayor, caught between a promise to close the jail and the grim reality that no one knew what would happen the moment those gates finally shut. As the debate raged, Another crisis quietly unfolded inside the walls of Rikers. Overcrowding had reached breaking point. Units designed to hold 30 men were crammed with 50. Tempers boiled. Sleep was nearly impossible with bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. Food ran short during lockdowns, and rumors spread like wildfire that some inmates might soon be released early to relieve pressure. On the outside, families grew restless. Mothers camped outside City Hall with posters of their loved ones, pleading for them not to be dumped into unsafe city jails. Meanwhile, victims' families stood just a few feet away, furious at the thought of their attackers being freed because the city had run out of space. Protesters clashed in the streets, police forming lines between them. But the tension inside the jail was even worse. A week after the first riot, word leaked to the inmates that one of the city's smaller jails, meant to take transfers from Rikers, was still. The standoff inside Rikers dragged on through the night. Spotlights from guard towers cut through the darkness, sweeping across the barricaded office where inmates shouted threats and demands. Outside, police boats circled the island, their flashing lights bouncing off the water. On the mainland, reporters camped out, feeding the story to millions glued to their screens. Inside the command center, officials debated their options. Some demanded an immediate raid, go in with riot gear, smoke and shields to break the standoff before it spread. Others warned that storming the room could ignite a full-blown prison uprising, with hundreds of men rioting across the island at once. One wrong move, a senior officer warned, and we'll lose the whole jail. Hours turned into tense silence. Then suddenly, a chilling sound echoed from the block, the sharp clang of metal striking concrete. The inmates were breaking apart furniture and reinforcing their barricade. Their chants grew louder. Shut Rikers down, no more cages. At dawn, negotiators made the first move. Through a megaphone, they offered food, water, and medical help if the inmates surrendered peacefully. But the response came quickly. A chair hurled through the window, shattering glass onto the yard below. The men inside weren't interested in talking. They wanted the world to hear their rage. Meanwhile, families of the inmates gathered at the edge of the East River, shouting across the water in desperation. Some begged their sons to come out alive. Others cursed the city, saying years of neglect had led to this. As pressure mounted, a shocking revelation emerged. One of the inmates leading the standoff had smuggled out a video using a contraband phone. Within minutes, it was online. The shaky footage showed inmates with bandaged faces and bruises, describing abuse by officers and unlivable conditions. The clip went. The fire roared inside the barricaded office, thick smoke filling the narrow hallways of Rikers. Guards in riot gear rushed forward, spraying water from hoses while others pounded on the door with shields. The air was so heavy with smoke that officers coughed through their masks, struggling to see. Inside, the inmates screamed and banged on the walls, refusing to surrender. In the command center, the decision was made. This was no longer a negotiation. It was an emergency. Tactical units were ordered in. The goal: regain control before the fire spread to the rest of the jail. As officers stormed the block, chaos erupted. Inmates swung pipes and shards of glass at the advancing guards. One officer was struck in the leg, collapsing to the ground as his team dragged him back. The clash echoed like a battlefield, shouts, alarms, boots stomping, and water spraying over flames. Meanwhile, outside the jail, helicopters captured every second. The footage of flames and flashing lights above Rikers Island played on every news channel. The city watched in disbelief. This wasn't just a standoff anymore. It looked like war inside America's most notorious jail. After hours of fighting, the tactical units finally forced their way inside the barricaded room. The fire was smothered. The inmates were dragged out, bloodied, coughing, but still shouting, "Shut it down!" Cameras outside captured the moment prisoners were marched away in chains. For supporters of closure, the images became proof. The city couldn't wait any longer. Rikers was out of control. But just as the dust began to settle, another problem exploded. With dozens of inmates injured, the jail's medical unit was overwhelmed. Stretchers filled the hallways. Some prisoners were rushed to hospitals under heavy guard, sparking rumors that a few had died in the chaos. Families outside panicked, demanding answers. Advocates Aki,